This video is going to be all about understanding survivor damage numbers. Now, Evil Dead the game has a lot of numbers regarding percentages and raw numbers when it comes to survivors' abilities, perks, or specialties. The issue with the game is that a lot of these numbers are not either explicitly expressed, shown at all, or worded properly. Now, a lot of the community has figured a lot of these numbers out, like if you're on the Discord, for example, but this can be very overwhelming to a lot of new players. And there's a lot of things to cover here, so let's get into it. So, for example, when I said that a lot of numbers aren't explicitly expressed, it says here that warriors have more health and inflict more melee damage, and it says that hunters inflict more range damage. The problem is that it doesn't explain exactly what this number is, and only through community testing have we been able to figure that out. It also doesn't explain things like the deficit in numbers that certain classes get, like for example hunters doing less melee damage and warriors doing less range damage. So to keep this as simple as possible, we're just going to start off with the basic class numbers for all classes. And these are the numbers. By default, leaders have no increase nor decrease in the base damage of all melee and ranged weapons. So to show you exactly what I'm talking about, for example, this hand axe does 35 damage. On a leader who has no increase or decrease in melee weapon damage, this weapon should do 35 damage. And there it is. 35 damage. And if we look at range weapons here, like the revolver, we can see that it does 150 damage. Now, it's not going to do 150 when I shoot it in particular with Annie, because Annie has a plus 10% damage for all range weapons, so it's going to do 150 plus 10%, which is 15, so 165, but you kind of get the point that leaders have no increase nor decrease with ranged or melee weapons. So let's do a little shot here. And there we go, 165. So next up we have warriors. Warriors by default do a plus 50% increase with all melee weapon damage, and they do negative 50% with all ranged weapons. So if I take Scotty here with the same hand axe that I used for Annie, which does 35 damage, if we add 50% to this, we're going to do 35 times 1.5, should do 52.5 damage. And there it is, 52.5 damage. Now, I know that it shows 53 when you hit the enemy, but through testing, you're going to see that this is actually true numbers, which I'm going to show you later. And here with warriors, again, I'm going to use the revolver. With a damage of 150 minus 50%, this revolver should do 75 damage to the body. Next up, we have hunters. Hunters, by default, do 50% more damage with ranged weapons and minus 30% damage with all melee weapons. Now again here, I have Hunter Ash. Because he's a hunter, he's going to do 30% less melee damage. So using the same hand axe, it has a damage of 35. If I multiply 35 by 0.07, you're going to see that it's going to do 24.5 damage. Now, the number that's going to pop up is 25, and again, it may seem like these numbers are rounding off, but it's actually true damage, which I'm going to show you later, so I should do 25 damage with this hit here, or exactly 24.5. And there it is. And we'll see that with range weapons, again, hunters do 50% more damage, so if we take the revolver, which does 150, and add 50% to that, which is half, or 75, it should do 225 to the body. And last but not least is support. Support classes all do negative 20% damage with all weapons. So if I take support Ash here, using the same hand axe, which has a damage of 35, and I minus 20%, by multiplying 35 times 0.08, I should do 28 damage. And there it is. And yet again here, I had the revolver that does 150 damage. If I multiply 150 by 0.08, which is minusing 20% essentially, this revolver should do 120 damage to the body. Now, another thing that may confuse new players in this game is how does combo damage work? You'll notice that despite the fact that I'm using Annie again because she just does a base damage of 35 and this number is easy to see, that if you continue doing a combo, she will not continue to do 35 damage. She'll actually start doing more, but what is the exact number on that? So here's the general rule for all combo damage. The first hit will do the base damage of the weapon. The next hit after that, if it is a light attack specifically, will do 10% more damage than the last hit. So if the first hit of this combo does 35 damage, the next hit will do 3.5 more damage or 10% more damage. Now, remember earlier when I said that I was going to explain that this damage is true numbers? If I take 35 and I add 3.5, I get 38.5. But the number that's going to show up in game is going to be 39 on the second hit. However, if we look at the third hit of the combo, we're going to see that the number is actually 42. And this is because we're actually adding 3.5 plus 3.5, which is 10%, and then another 10% from the last hit, which is plus 7 damage. 3.5 plus 3.5 is 7, so our combo should be 35 plus 3.5, which is 38.5, plus another 3.5, which is 42, or 35 plus 7. So again, the general rule is that light combos will do the base damage of the first hit, and then 10% for each consecutive hit after that. The general rule for heavy attacks is that heavy attacks will always do double the damage of the base weapon damage. That also includes any increases or decreases in damage based on class. This girl is just smacking me up here while I'm explaining this. So, if the hand axe does 35 damage, then a heavy attack should do 70 damage. And there we see it. Now, the general rule for heavy combos, unlike light combos, is that consecutive attacks will not do 10% more damage, they will do 5% more damage. So, if the first attack of this heavy combo is 70 damage, the next attack will do 5% more damage, bringing it up to 73.5, but the number will be expressed as 74. Also, when it comes to the ramping damage of heavy combos or even light combos, each consecutive attack, like I said, will do 10 for light combos and 5% more damage for each consecutive hit. Even if you miss one of these hits in the combo, the damage will still ramp up. So here, if I do 70 and I whip the second attack and I do the third attack, you'll see that I still get that increase in damage. Now, another thing that may be confusing for a lot of new players is these numbers right here, or these stars in each character's frame. So if I hit here, show stats, you're going to see here that Ash vs. Evil Dead Ash has 3 stars in defense, melee weapons, ranged weapons, and team assistance. Or if I go to the Warriors, for example, you'll see that Scotty here has 4 stats in his melee weapon damage, but Army of Darkness Ash has 5 stats in his melee weapon damage. Now, these stats here are arbitrary. They don't actually mean anything. Army of Darkness Ash does not do more melee weapon damage than Scotty does. They both have the same base 50% increase to all melee weapons. These stats here are more so like a guideline of how the character specializes and how they play. Next up, remember when I said that a lot of numbers in this game either aren't shown whatsoever, are not worded properly, or not expressed accurately? We're going to go over that. So another big contention amongst people, especially new players, is that they see things like, for example, this number here on Scotty's collateral damage of how much damage he does with his heavy attack is very clearly expressed. So damage dealt to nearby enemies is 13%. Pretty easy to understand, simple, right? But if we look at weapon specialties, like for example his lumberjack axe, it simply states that the lumberjack axe has a faster attack speed and deals increased health, balance bar, and dismemberment damage. But it doesn't say exactly what that number is. Well, the key to all specialties, for example like Hunter Ash's, as soon as I get to it here, his double barrel says the same thing, except for range damage, right? The double barrel has a faster attack speed and deals increased health, balance bar, and dismemberment damage, but again, it doesn't say what this number is. The general rule for all weapon specialties in this game, that includes Arthur's sword, Scotty's axe, Ash's double barrel, Kelly's meat hammer, and Amanda's pistol, Ed's crossbow. All of these increases in weapon damage is 20%. Another thing to cover is that how, again, I said that a lot of the things in this game are not worded properly. For example, if we look at Lord Arthur here, his numbers may be pretty difficult to understand because of the wording of his ability. It says here for his active ability that when activated, this ability increases the damage inflicted by your melee attacks and those of your nearby teammates, in addition to reducing fear levels. And it also says if Lord Arthur has a sword, he inflicts extra damage. This makes it seem that Lord Arthur does an increased 30% damage with his sword, specifically when he activates this ability, but that just isn't true. Lord Arthur has an aura that increases his damage by 30% with his light and heavy attacks. His ability gives him another 30% melee damage to you and nearby teammates, but what it doesn't state is that his sword is simply just a weapon specialty similar to the other characters, like for example Scotty's axe here, that just does another 20% damage. So Arthur just has a weapon specialty of 20% as long as he's holding a sword. His aura gives him 30%, and his ability gives him another 30%. If we look at the raw numbers here, the sword does 80 damage. His specialty gives him another 20% damage, which is 80 plus 1.2, plus his aura plus his ability will be 80 times 1.2 times 1.3 times 1.3, which will give him with his ability at base 162 damage with a normal light swing of his sword. And last but not least, the last thing I'm going to explain is that some things in this game just aren't expressed well when it comes to damage numbers. For example, if you look at something like Devastating Force, it says that this increases melee weapon damage by 15%. And this works as it looks like. It works as intended. For example, on Annie, who has no increase or decrease to melee weapon damage, this will give her a base 15% increase to her melee weapon damage. But if we look at, for example, Master of Influence, it says here that this strengthens the effects of your aura if you put 4 points into it by 20%. But this is not how the ability works. This Master of Influence is actually a terrible perk to put points into. It's 20% of your aura's percentage. So if we look at Annie's aura, for example, it says you and all teammates within this aura's effect radius deal more damage with ranged weapons, and this is 10%. Now if we go back to Master of Influence, it says that this strengthens the effect of your aura by 20%. But this is only 20% of 10%. So you get a net 2% increase to your damage aura, so 12%, or 20% of 10%, which is 2%. And this is true with all of the leaders' auras. If we look at Arthur here, his aura gives an extra 30% increase to melee weapon damage. This is actually just 20% of 30%, which is 6%, which will give him a total of 36% on all of his auras. So again, just to recap all numbers that I've gone over, leaders have no increase or decrease in melee or ranged weapon damage. Warriors have an increase of 50% with melee, negative 50% with ranged. Hunters have an increase of 50% damage with ranged weapons and do negative 30% with melee damage, and supports do negative 20% damage with all weapons. When it comes to combos, your first hit will do the base damage of that character's attack, including 50 or negative 30 or negative 20 depending on the class you're playing, and then each consecutive hit after that will do 10% more damage than the last. Heavy attacks do double the damage of your base light attack, and then an increase of 5% for each consecutive hit after that. If you're looking for more information on damage numbers regarding this game, there's still a lot more to cover, including things like the numbers on all of the demons and stats regarding things like fear, actual DPS, balance bar numbers, which I'm sure the community will continue to figure out as we go along. Keep in mind that some of these characters are also bugged, like for example, Arthur, despite the fact that he's supposed to be only giving a 30% increase in melee damage, his aura is also giving a 30% increase to range damage, so be careful when testing these things. For more Evil Dead content, I will have more information regarding numbers and damage and stats and strategies, and I look forward to seeing you then. Thanks for watching.